My mother-in-law called the entire family for a big gathering and declared that she would never accept me as part of her family. Staying calm, I took out a document and started reading it aloud in front of everyone. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in shock. My name is Ashley. I'm 32 years old, and I married the love of my life, Bobby. 5 years ago, Bobby is the most wonderful person I've ever met. Kind, fun-loving, and someone who makes me feel special every single day. However, the same cannot be said about his mother, Catherine, who, from the very beginning, seemed to have a problem with me. I understand Bobby is her cherished son, and she wants to protect him, but her protective nature often crosses the line. Catherine has a talent for pushing buttons under the guise of innocence, provoking reactions, and then playing the victim, a behavior that many might recognize in someone they know. Unfortunately for me, that someone is my mother-in-law. I was raised to value directness and open communication, traits that stood in stark contrast to Catherine's approach. These qualities of mine were what attracted Bobby to me. He's gentler and more reserved, a perfect complement to my outspoken nature. They say opposites attract, and in our case, it's true. My background in life coaching has given me insight into human behavior, and it's clear to me that Catherine, despite her claims, does not always act with good intentions. Our personalities clashed from the start, and our first meeting set the tone for our relationship. It happened during a dinner with Bobby, his father Jeffrey, and Catherine. Out of nowhere, she commented on my eating habits, suggesting I should eat less. Her remark was so unexpected that everyone fell silent. I was mortified, my face burning with embarrassment. While Jeffrey looked down uncomfortably and Bobby, visibly upset, confronted his mother, Catherine tried to backtrack, claiming she was only offering advice and referencing old photos Bobby had shown her, where, according to her, I looked better. Despite my instincts to address the comment directly, I held back, not wanting to make a scene at my first meeting with Bobby's family. Instead, I forced a polite smile and thanked her, burying my frustration. I wanted so badly to make a good impression, but the encounter left me shaken. As time passed, Catherine's behavior only worsened. Her antagonism grew, and our interactions became more strained. I hoped that showing her how much I cared for Bobby would help ease the tension, but it seemed to have the opposite effect. On the bright side, my relationship with Bobby's father, Jeffrey, blossomed. He was kind and welcoming, and it was clear Bobby had inherited his gentle nature. Bobby's extended family and friends, including his lifelong buddy Wayne, also embraced me warmly. I felt supported by everyone, except Catherine. Her efforts to undermine me peaked during our wedding planning. She insisted on controlling every detail from my hairstyle to my dress, even suggesting I mimic her own bridal look from years ago. When I politely declined, she outright insulted me in front of my bridal party, calling me ugly, though she quickly tried to backtrack. The damage was done. Jeffrey, thankfully, stepped in to put an end to her outbursts, but the sting of her words lingered. Her attempts to overshadow the day didn't succeed, thanks to the love and support of Bobby's family and friends. Still, the emotional toll of her actions weighed heavily on me. Over time, her negativity began to drain my vibrant energy, and I realized something had to change. Fast forward to today, 5 years into our marriage, and we found ourselves back at Bobby's childhood home for a Sunday dinner. Catherine had invited us along with Bobby's childhood friend Wayne, hinting at an important announcement. Though I was skeptical of her motives, what unfolded that evening was truly unexpected. The evening took an unexpected turn when Catherine, with a theatrical flourish, announced her big news. She had planned a family trip to Florida for her upcoming birthday and waved a confirmation letter triumphantly. Excitement rippled through the room, with Bobby's face lighting up at the mention of Florida, a place he'd always dreamed of visiting. "That's incredible," he exclaimed, his enthusiasm mirrored by the others around the table. Gratitude filled the air as everyone celebrated Catherine's generous gesture. But just as the mood reached its peak, Catherine turned to me with a blunt, chilling statement. "Oh, actually, you're not coming." The words hung in the air, the room falling silent as confusion spread across every face. Bobby, visibly taken aback, demanded clarification, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "What do you mean she's not coming? That can't be right." It quickly came to light that Catherine had deliberately canceled my ticket, claiming it was due to last-minute arrangements and a desire to avoid extra charges. My heart sank as the realization hit. My presence had been planned for and then just as easily erased, without a single word to me. Tension bubbled over as the others voiced their outrage. Wayne and I sat quietly, observing the growing chaos as Catherine's reasoning was pressed for. Finally, under the weight of everyone's demands, she revealed her true motive. She wanted to spend her later years surrounded by those she felt closest to. "You just don't make that list," she stated coldly, her words cutting through me like a blade. The room erupted. Bobby, furious, demanded an explanation for her blatant exclusion while Catherine weakly tried to justify herself. Wayne is like family, she argued, pointing to him as an example of someone she deemed precious and cherished. Her logic was as insulting as it was flawed. Bobby wasted no time in calling her out. Wayne isn't even blood-related, yet he's on the list? And Ashley, my wife, isn't? His voice trembled with anger and disbelief. How can you say she's not part of this family? She's my wife. Mom, that makes her family, whether you like it or not. Catherine's dismissive smile faltered as Bobby's words struck a nerve. Her attempt to justify her favoritism only deepened the divide. I couldn't stay silent any longer. No, I said firmly, my voice cutting through the noise. All eyes turned to me, Catherine's included. Her smugness disappeared, replaced by a flicker of unease. This isn't about family or last-minute arrangements, I continued. This is about respect, or your complete lack of it. I may not have been part of your life for as long as Wayne, but I am your son's wife. That should mean something, and I refuse to let you diminish that any longer. The room was still, the tension palpable as my words sink in. Bobby reached for my hand, his grip reassuring as he stood by my side. Catherine, for the first time, seemed genuinely at a loss for how to respond. In that moment, the dynamics of the room shifted, and the cracks in Catherine's facade began to show. I laid bare the truth of the past 5 years, the blatant dislike Catherine harbored for me, her unbearable behavior, and her narcissistic tendencies. It was evident to everyone, not just me. When Catherine attempted to silence me with a thinly veiled threat to watch my words, it only fueled my resolve. I declared my intention to leave a place that had become a battleground rather than a home. But before stepping away, I turned to Bobby, my husband, and reaffirmed how much he meant to me despite everything. I urged him to join the family trip to Florida, acknowledging the complicated bond he shared with his mother, driven by love despite her flaws. Facing Catherine directly, I laid out an undeniable truth. Her efforts to push me away would never succeed. My love for her son tethered me to this family, regardless of whether she accepted it. When I accused her of an unhealthy obsession with undermining me, her expression faltered. It was a nerve struck too precisely to ignore. I called out her relentless attempts to diminish me. Despite my consistent kindness and patience, my parting words were a declaration of resilience and independence. While Catherine might have decided I wasn't part of the family and didn't belong in Florida, I affirmed my unwavering place in Bobby's life, and, by extension, in the family. I promised to remain steadfast for Bobby, Jeffrey, and even Wayne, drawing a clear and unyielding line with Catherine. This confrontation was more than a moment of defiance. It was a turning point. For the first time, Catherine's sharp tongue failed her. Her usual quick retorts were nowhere to be found, leaving her in stunned silence. I knew I had finally made an impact. As I prepared to leave, I shared a tender moment with Bobby. He offered to drive me home. Concern edged across his face, but I reassured him of my well-being and encouraged him to stay for the family discussion about the trip. Retrieving my purse from the kitchen, I found Catherine there. Seemingly having retreated to collect her thoughts, her request for me to leave swiftly was expected. Echoing her earlier hostility with an added layer of animosity, I ignored her unfazed and reached for my purse only to notice a letter beside it, unmistakably in Catherine's handwriting. At first, I hesitated. What could this letter contain? Her bitterness, perhaps, or was it something entirely unexpected? I assumed the letter was related to the Florida trip. Driven by a mix of curiosity and lingering spite, I decided to glance at it. Addressed to Wayne, the letter began with affectionate words, painting a picture of a close bond between Catherine and him. As I read further, the tone shifted dramatically. Catherine expressed a diminished love for her son Bobby, contrasting it with her enduring affection for Wayne. This revelation was shocking, suggesting a clear favoritism toward Wayne over Bobby. The implications were deeply unsettling, exposing a family dynamic far more fractured than I had imagined. I was torn between the impropriety of reading someone else's correspondence and the weight of what I had uncovered. The letter demanded attention. It couldn't be ignored. Realizing the significance of the discovery, I carefully considered my next steps. Everyone who needed to be involved, Bobby, Wayne, and Jeffrey, was still in the house. The question now was how to address this without deepening the existing tensions. The weight of the decision bore down on me. After scrutinizing the letter once more to ensure I hadn't misunderstood its contents, I returned to the dining room with it in hand. The words were as shocking as they had been upon my first reading. As I entered, the room quieted and all eyes turned to me. Jeffrey, ever the peacemaker, quickly attempted to smooth things over. He apologized for Catherine's earlier behavior and reassured me that I would join them on the Florida trip. He dismissed Catherine's actions as a temporary mood, confident he could persuade her to reconsider, but his reassurances were unnecessary. I had uncovered something far more pressing. The concern in Bobby's eyes was unmistakable. He likely feared the recent confrontation and ongoing strain with his mother had pushed me to my breaking point. In our private moments, Bobby had often expressed amazement at my patience, marveling at how deeply I loved him despite everything. I met his worried gaze and silently resolved to protect him from what I had read. When I inquired about Catherine's whereabouts, Jeffrey explained she had retreated to nurse a headache, likely a result of our earlier confrontation. While her tendency to prioritize herself was a familiar annoyance, this time, her absence felt like an obstacle. What I had to share required her presence, yet the urgency of the situation and the encouragement of those present pushed me to proceed without her. The growing anxiety etched into Bobby's expression made it clear that delaying any longer would only exacerbate his stress. "Fine," I said, conceding to the urgency of the moment. "Let's do this." Drawing a deep breath, I began. When I was in the kitchen, retrieving my purse, I found this. Holding up the letter, I paused, letting its presence sink in. What I read, my voice faltered briefly, but I pressed on. "Changes everything." The weight of Catherine's words hung heavy in the air as I explained the contents of the letter. Careful to reveal the details with sensitivity, the room was silent except for the sound of Bobby exhaling sharply, his expression shifting from concern to pain. The revelation struck deeply, unraveling years of buried dynamics and forcing an undeniable truth into the open. In that moment, I understood this wasn't just about Catherine's actions or the letter itself. It was about the future of our family, what we could rebuild, and what might be forever lost. Gathering my resolve, I prepared for the storm that was sure to follow. I shared the shocking contents of the letter with Bobby, Wayne, and Jeffrey. As I read aloud, the words hung heavily in the room, exposing Catherine's deep-seated resentment toward me and the drastic action she planned to take against her son. The letter detailed her preference for Wayne over Bobby, her decision to disinherit Bobby in Wayne's favor, and her baseless blame of me for the supposed rift in her relationship with her son. The revelation was jarring. Catherine's bitterness and readiness to sever ties with Bobby painted a chilling picture. When I finished reading, the room was thick with tension, each person grappling with the betrayal in their own way. Jeffrey, ever the mediator, was on the verge of tears. Wayne appeared stunned, struggling to process the extent of Catherine's plans. Bobby, however, was a storm of fury and disbelief, his emotions oscillating between hurt and indignation. The realization hit Bobby hardest. He wrestled with how his mother could justify cutting him off while blaming me for her actions. It was a harsh wake-up call for all of us, laying bare the depth of Catherine's manipulation. The ensuing discussion was emotional and heated. With Bobby venting his frustration over her toxic behavior, it became clear that something had to change. 3 weeks passed after this revelation, leading up to the much-anticipated Florida trip. Unbeknownst to Catherine, a plan had been set in motion, a direct response to her divisive actions. On the morning of the trip, Catherine found a letter from Jeffrey by her bedside. The note, written in a tone of normalcy, instructed her to meet the family at the airport and suggested that all was proceeding as planned. Eager to begin the trip, Catherine hurried to the airport, unaware of the seismic shift in family dynamics caused by her letter. At the airport, her frantic search for her family was a physical manifestation of the confusion and isolation her actions had sown. Assuming they were already aboard the plane, she boarded, clinging to the hope of reuniting with them in Florida. After a long journey, Catherine eagerly called Jeffrey, ready to celebrate together. Instead, Jeffrey revealed the truth: they hadn't gone to Florida at all. The family was still at home, gathered together, a unified front against the discord she had tried to create. Her confusion turned to shock as Jeffrey explained the change of plans. He confronted her about the letter, exposing her attempts to cut Bobby out of her will and the unjustified animosity toward me. Catherine's denials and excuses were dismissed by the family, who collectively made it clear that her actions had irreparably damaged their trust. The confrontation reached its peak when the family unanimously decided to leave Catherine to her own devices. Even on her birthday, her divisive behavior had led to her isolation. They hoped her time alone in Florida would prompt reflection on the gravity of her actions. The family's solidarity in the face of Catherine's betrayal underscored the strength of their bond. Bobby, Jeffrey, Wayne, and I stood firm, valuing respect and forgiveness while holding her accountable for the pain she had caused. Catherine's realization of her solitude marked a rare moment of vulnerability. In a desperate attempt to reconcile, she reached out to Jeffrey, seeking his company. However, he remained resolute, emphasizing that any return to the family required a serious discussion about boundaries and a genuine change in her behavior. Bobby, too, made his position clear. Any future relationship with his mother depended on her willingness to truly change. He set firm boundaries, warning that further disrespect would result in permanent estrangement. Wayne, recognizing his role in enabling her behavior through kindness, withdrew, further isolating her. Despite Catherine's pleas for me to mediate, I maintained that mending her relationships was her responsibility alone. As time has passed, she has worked to repair the damage, though regaining trust and respect has proven to be an uphill battle.